session. So we want to quickly review what is the SpecDD process. So if you guys recall, a SpecDD is a hybrid agile process. It's designed and improved based on the fact that agile process works in the real world. Agile, like Scrum, XP, can improve a team productivity. The reason is, as you make the team self-driving, as you create a simple method and allow powering your development team, which is like 7 minus and plus 2 for an agile, typical agile team or Scrum team. At the beginning of a development sprint, you make a commitment. So you form a sprint backlog, which represent also the workload of the team for the current sprint. Then a software project is about to create a working software based on product backlog. Then you continuously run the sprint, first sprint, second sprint, third sprint, initially development sprint. Towards the release date, you start to run release sprint, which is about committing more defects. And finally, your working software get released. During the development, at any time, a good agile team claims the working software is usable, is potentially releasable. Especially at the end of each sprint, the working software, as a good agile team, you need to strike for quality and make sure the software can be used by the potential customers. I think the reality of the agile adoption proved two things. One is it's the majority. It's the most widely used method. Second, the adoption as it becomes the most popular use method, it proves in the real world, agile actually does not replace traditional method. Instead, agile mixes itself with other agile methods and with traditional methods. That is why, as the founder, I start to form my belief that the future of agile actually is going hybrid. Agile, as its best to use function to improve the productivity, can be used as building function blocks and plug into really any methods for the future. When that happens, agile as a name becomes less important because agile as the best used functions such as shorter development sprints, burn down reports, make the commitment, estimate time remaining order points, let the team feel proud, and let the team they have to feel they have the ownership of driving themselves, creating a self-driving team can be really used by any process regardless which method you can use. So as a SpecDD, we believe the development process need to be hybrided, need to be integrated with the requirement management process and the quality processes. Quality should not only become a claim that the working software is releasable at any time, especially can be potentially used by the real customers for their production usage. Instead, artifacts related to quality, such as test cases, test plan, process about running the test cycles by a independent but coordinated testing team should be formally presented as part of a development method. That is why SpecDD introduces the supporting processes surrounding the requirements management and the quality processes. So where requirement is formally managed, and it helps you to populate the product backlog and the sprint backlog. As requirement exists to be not becoming something burned out. If you guys think about product backlog is consumable. As it becomes the working software, the product backlog items and the sprint backlog items get consumed. You don't really have an object existing in the system from the starting to the end, and it always remains. Requirement is different. As you put the epic and the spec into part of the requirement space, creating processes to manage the requirement, they can better help you to drive the quality creation, where you're creating test cases to form the testing library or the testing standard. And you quantify such quality standard into sets of test cases, and then you have a base to create test plan and to run test cycles according to the test plan. In terms of the SpecDD hybrid object model, it pays less attention to the people, to the job roles, and to the processes. Instead, it shows you all the artifacts, all the objects of the SpecDD processes, where development is about creating stories, creating development tasks, and represent the workload for each sprint. So in other words, a sprint representing a main release or sub-release of a development space is recognized by the workload, which consists of the stories and the tasks. Such stories are often from the requirement spec directly in this line, as this line representing the specs get assigned to create the stories. And such story can be also from the product backlog. In other words, there should be a line here, of course. Requirement specs get assigned to the product backlog, staging the workload or the backlog items in the product backlog, and then assign such backlog into the development space. Or you can directly assign requirement into the development space to create the workload for sprint. For testings, once you have a requirement, once you use the spec to quantify the requirement or to normalize the requirement, where, if you guys recall, each spec is about 3 days size, meaning the requirement spec should not be too big. It takes about 3 days effort to implement such a requirement. As the requirement gets normalized or formally represented, then you can better create test cases to represent the quality aspect of a requirement. Such test cases can be used by the Agile team to create subtasks of QA testing for development tasks. And the subtask of a development task is used to make sure every development task within a sprint goes through an effort of QA testing verify. And such QA testing verify is performed by the QA floaters. QA floater is a term used in SpecDD to represent those QA engineers, 1 or 2, who co-locate, join the Agile team. With the test cases, a QA subtask represents both the execution of such testing, but as well as the effort of creating and improving testing standard, the test case. Obviously, that becomes the agile sprint process partially is the creation and refining, improving process of testing standard, testing library, which can be used by the regression team to create test plan as well to create test cycle for the regression testing needs. So that's kind of an overview of what is a SpecDD process, what are the artifacts involved in the process. These artifacts or these objects, if you think of these objects during your development iterations, during your testing cycles, then these objects represent the dynamic nature of being created and being improved. And then if you think about these objects become accountable, representing the team members' results, and what makes them proud, what makes them self-driving, what makes them to recognize the working software can be releasable by. Really, it's because of these leftover objects, which we refer them as the artifacts of the SpecDD process. These objects are representing the effort, the driving team for the development testing effort. So objects model and process model work together, reflect the driving of team. That's why in the process we also have job roles.